You're listening to Simon Scriver's amazingly ultimate fundraising superstar podcast, talking all things fundraising, charities, nonprofits, and more. Here's your host, as always, Simon Scriver.
How do you feel about cannabis? You might know it as weed, African broccoli, Amsterdam's finest, Mary Jane, jazz cabbage, herb, grandpa's medicine, marijuana. Whatever you call it, you probably have an opinion about it. And whether you think it's a bad thing and bad for society and bad for the people who use it, or you rightly think it's absolutely amazing and we should all be dabbling in it, then you probably have strong opinions, but you're wondering, why am I talking about it on a fundraising podcast? Well, to talk about it today, I have a lovely guest with me. I have Sam Laprade dialing in all the way from Canada. How are you, Sam?
I'm fantastic.
Sam, you have some strong opinions on marijuana we're going to get into. But before we do, maybe you could tell the listeners, who are you, Sam?
Well, I've been in the fundraising sector for about 30 years. I've worked frontline, everything from major gift officer, special events, and everything in between, capital campaign, direct mail, annual giving. And about 18 months ago, I went out on my own as a full-time consultant. And my specialty has really become donor database analytics, stewardship, and just talking about sort of disruptive topics in the sector as well, including cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, you're an international keynote speaker now, and you talk about all sorts of things, mental health, and you try and push the envelope a little bit, think outside the box.
For sure. We pushed it recently at AFP Congress, and which I think was a good thing. I think the response I received was incredible, and I think it was, I shared a lot of my own stories, so I think that always becomes relatable for people, and there was lots of feedback on it, and positive feedback, which was excellent.
Yeah, well, I was happy to be in the audience. It was wonderful. It was brilliant. You're also a radio host, which is quite intimidating.
I am. I started my career actually in radio in the 90s, and recently found a way to combine my two passions, which is radio and fundraising. And I started a radio show in February of 2018 called An Hour to Give on a radio station here in Ottawa called 1310 News. And if you go to 1310 News, you can see all the podcasts we've done recently. And it's really an opportunity for not-for-profits to share about philanthropy, volunteerism, and community. So they get to tell a long story about what they're doing, which is really rare these days, to be able to, not-for-profits are sort of given 30-second PSAs, or they're given, 140 characters. But I really wanted to provide not-for-profits an opportunity to tell the long story. So they get to come in and talk about impact of the work, inspire listeners to get involved, and also just really sometimes just even make their name known. A lot of people don't know some of these smaller charities.
That's really cool. I don't really know of anyone else doing that, and it's nice to see someone pushing it like that.
We understand it's rare. Like we nobody's said they've ever heard of it before, like you, and it's really it's sold out for 2018.
Wow!
And very exciting.
2019.
For 2018, so it sold up until now.
Yeah.
And we've got about half sold for 2019.
Wow.
But even more exciting, a business came in and bought 2 years of it. So they've sponsored it for 2 years, 2019 and 2020.
Wow.
So the show's not going anywhere. Yeah.
Congratulations. That's good.
Thanks.
So I'm lucky to get you now before you're really a huge business.
I'll always stay in touch with you, Simon.
Yeah, you remember the little people. So you're opening my mind to all sorts of things, and one of the things you opened my mind to was this crossing of cannabis and charity and fundraising, and it was something that I'd never really thought about until I read an article you wrote. Could you kind of just tell me what the article was covering?
For sure. So in May of 2018, I had made an investment into a local cannabis company that is focusing on the medical benefits of cannabis. And so I made that investment, and in speaking with the owners, we sort of talked about the fact that they couldn't give money away to some organizations that they wanted to. And some people were, sort of talking about, other cannabis companies too were saying to me, it's hard. Sometimes they don't want to take the gift. They're a bit nervous. And not-for-profits, on the other hand, I was hearing from some of my clients, they're like, well, there's going to be a lot of money coming from cannabis companies, but we're nervous to accept it. So I sort of saw two sides of it. And so I wrote an article, like you said, called Pot or No Pot. And it was basically outlining, not really, saying people should do it one way or another. I think each organization needs to do what's best for them. And so, for instance, in Canada here, the University of British Columbia, they're doing a lot of research with cannabis. So it made sense for them to accept a gift from cannabis company.
Yeah.
But you take an organization, maybe like a homeless shelter that has, a big addictions program, they may not want to accept a gift. So it was really talking about the public relations side of it, the board relations side of it, the staff side of it, because you want to make sure everybody's singing from the same book. What you don't want to do is you don't want to sponsor, let's say, ABC Cannabis Company. You don't want that all over your big next fun run. And the staff are kind of going, oh, yeah, I can't believe they did that. And donors are hearing that and participants are hearing that. So there's lots of different perspectives I looked at it from. And then the really big thing, I actually held a webinar in October, about a week before cannabis went legal here in Canada. I held a webinar really focused on giving policies. And a lot of people, as you may know, sort of dust off their giving policies about every 10 years. They kind of, go, oh, I guess we better look at this. And a lot of giving policies will eliminate gifts from tobacco companies and alcohol companies and strip clubs and that kind of thing. But nobody, of course, would have cannabis in their giving policy. So I walked people through that.
It's mad. I mean, because it's an old story with, alcohol and tobacco are the big ones, and nonprofits very quickly make a decision on that because it's something we're really used to. It's legal and it's obvious. And so most organizations I work with won't accept from tobacco or alcohol. Some will. But what's interesting about cannabis is that it's becoming legal in our lifetime. And that's kind of unique, isn't it? I mean, in Ireland, we're a good few years away from it. But for cannabis, I mean, has anything happened like that in your lifetime, that something has become legal, which is frankly going to be massively lucrative? And it's just a whole new wave of cash potentially, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's exactly why I sort of twigged into it and thought, here's all these organizations. When I do my donor database analytics, I get to see organizations, their second gift conversion rates are 30%. So for every 10 donors they're keeping 3.
Yeah.
So it made me sort of think about, this is to your point, it's a brand new industry that's ripe with cash. They want to make impacts in the community. It's not necessarily, a lot of these companies aren't necessarily doing recreation marijuana either. They're actually, there's huge medical benefits to it in the cancer, in cancer treatment, in epilepsy, in many, many different things, with children, with adults, with everything in between. So what I realized quickly was that they wanted to make an impact. So it was basically, and once again, to your point, is we're never going to see a massive industry come in like that. So how are we going to capitalize on it from a not-for-profit perspective, but also be respectful of our mission and our mandate? Because, the last thing we want to do is take money from somebody that goes against what we're actually trying to do. So every organization has to look at it individually.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, let's take a step back. So for any organization who's thinking about writing a gift acceptance policy, I mean, I would argue that, it's not top of the list when a new charity forms. It's very low down the priorities. And most organizations I've dealt with haven't got one until it becomes a problem.
Exactly. I knew you were going to say that.
So I mean, when should an organization actually be looking at this, and how do you start considering your gift acceptance policy?
Well, I think it does have to be something that someone champions and somebody actually feels strongly about. What you'll find too sometimes is a board member will ask for it. So that's happened to a couple of my clients. But I always like to look at my gift acceptance policy when I'm doing a new term of board. So basically, when I've got a new board new board members join, that's when I like to bring the gift acceptance policy and say, is everybody still good with this? But starting fresh, and if you've never had one, I think you just have to just do it. And if you don't have one, you don't want to be sort of struggling when you get this check in the mail and say, can we accept this? Can we not accept this?
Yeah.
I think it's a wise thing for the fundraiser or the CEO, director of development, to be the champion of it. And then you want to get the opinions of everybody around the board. And how I describe it, when I did my webinar, is you might have a board member, over here named Ted, and Ted might have had, a board, Ted might have had an experience with cannabis that was really bad. Maybe maybe his brother committed suicide because of drug addiction, and he blames it on a gateway drug like marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Mary sitting over here, and Mary's daughter is having a brand new quality of life because she's having cannabis through CPD and having an opportunity to have a brand new life because of the medical marijuana. You're going to have varying people around the table on how they feel about it, their personal, and then how it's going to apply to the sector. So I think it has to be done on an annual basis. I think it's important to refresh it. They're not that difficult, to be honest. I mean, a lot of the ones I've seen are even just one page. But board terms, I always like to sort of bring 4 or 5 key policies forward when new boards start, because it's an opportunity to get a fresh look. And once again, something similar is something new come up in the sector, is something new that we should think about.
And so we're trying to preempt it, because the last thing you want to do is be scrambling to figure out whether you should or should not accept this gift. And I've seen, real nightmare stories of where an organization almost half accepts a gift, or the fundraiser accepts a gift because there's nothing like this in place. And when it gets to CEO level or board level, suddenly someone raises an objection, and you have a very awkward and embarrassing time of like backpedaling or trying to find some middle ground. And that's not good for anyone. Giving
a gift back is a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, how do you say no to a business that you just simply won't accept it from?
Well, that's the other reason you have a gift acceptance policy. So the fundraiser points to the gift acceptance policy, which has been established by the board, which is the community.
Yeah, so it's like kind of, my hands are tied. This comes from up above. Thank you so much. But yeah, that makes sense. So within an organization, whether it's on a board or even going down to staff level and program staff, everyone's going to have an opinion, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And everyone's going to have a different opinion. I mean, I do corporate fundraising training, and part of it is talking a little bit about when do you say no. And it's one of my favorite parts of the training, because you put it out to the room and you ask, who would accept this gift? And you have some hands go up and some hands go down, and they all have really strong, firm reasons about why it makes sense or why it doesn't.
Right.
But everyone has a very different line. So how do you find the common line?
For me, and I've worked with a couple of organizations recently, they saw that article and they've asked me to help out. I always ask them to look through the organization lens. What's best for this organization? Then I always ask them, if this was on the front of the newspaper, would that be a bad thing?
Yeah.
And that always is the clinker for them.
Yeah.
Like, that's always the thing they go, oh yeah, no. Or they'll be like, no, actually, you know what? We're the university, and we're thinking ahead, and they're going to create things that are, different products. They're going to help people with anxiety or mental health, or maybe it's with, whatever ailment you might have. And we want to be in the forefront. So we're actually really proud of it. So looking through the lens of, if you want to be on the front page of the newspaper, tends to be the one where everybody kind of can come together.
Yeah.
And when, and you're always going to have disagreements at the board level. That's why you have a board. If you had a board of all yes people, then you don't really have a board. You've got yes people.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that you do have that discussion. And one of the ones I wrote, we agreed to, after working with their board, is we agreed to put a policy in place for 1 year of not accepting, with the promise that it would come back next October. so October of 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and they would revisit it. They would see what else had happened in the sector. They would see what other organizations had dealt with, but they would revisit it. And everybody walked away happy with that.
Yeah, well, that's smart. You're not tying yourself down forever, or you're leaving the conversation open a little bit, but you still have that document in place.
Mm-hmm. And it's great for a fundraiser because, let's say ABC Cannabis Company comes to you and they say, we really, we'd love to get involved in your event. You can say, we've got this policy in place. We're going to be revisiting in a year. Can we see what other ways you could get involved? And you've heard me speak. I mean, time, talent, and treasure is always a lens I like to look through. So what other opportunities, in terms of time, does your team want to come in and do some volunteer work? From a talent perspective, do you have a great social media guru that could help us up our game? And then we can maybe look at treasure.
What's the ethics of kind of almost like stealthily accepting these gifts? It's always interesting that, people have an opinion on accepting or not accepting a gift, but there's nothing to stop a company just putting the money into the account anonymously.
Yeah,
or is there?
Through Canada Helps. So in our case, we have Canada Helps here. They could make an anonymous gift. And because they check the little box that says we won't know who it's from.
So Canada Helps is like an online giving platform. So
exactly.
Like over here, we have everyday giving and things like that. So almost to funnel it through there. But for most companies, that's not good enough because they want the marketing.
Exactly. So you want, they want to, if, those, I can't stand them, but the big giant checks and all that kind of stuff. Some people still have a vision they have to be seen, with 18 people holding a, a 2 day drives me crazy. But those are the kinds of opportunities some people think of, or they want to be listed somewhere, or they want sponsorship, sponsorship to some funky event. And they want to be, maybe with, here in Ottawa, we've got the Ottawa Senators, and the Ottawa Senators Foundation is a hockey club, and they put on a big soiree gala, and all the hockey players are there. So maybe a cannabis company wants to, be the sponsor for the music that night. This is all hypothetical, but, so it's that kind of thing where they, cannabis companies want to be where the hip people are. Especially the recreation ones. So they want to be seen in a certain way. So they'll be looking for opportunities in the sponsorship arena too. Yeah,
well, I suppose it's their target audience. It lines up with who they're. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for me to imagine really, because I'm coming from a country where even medical marijuana is a long way off. There's a lot of resistance to it. So it's just really interesting to see what I would guess is almost like a crystal ball. In 20 years, we're probably going to be having this conversation over here. I mean, what should organizations be doing now, in countries where it's not legal yet? Is it worth doing? I mean, is there a quick turnaround time in this kind of policy thinking?
No, it took Canada a long time.
Yeah.
It took us a long time. To be honest with you, I would rather see somebody, especially when it's not legal in your country, I would rather see them put time and effort into the people that are connected and can give. Going back to second gift conversion, try and even up your second gift conversion by 10% a year. That's where I would put energy in, not into something that, especially when it's not legal, because it just comes with all other headaches, and it's not worth it. But there's obviously some states in the United States, some states that it's legal as well, and they've all had their challenges as well. So I've been following it closely, and it's been really interesting here in Canada for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even over here, the opinion is changing on other areas. I mean, for us, the drug of choice in Ireland is alcohol, which is, very acceptable and very much embraced by our culture. But that's changing a bit. I mean, over here, we have the Arthur Guinness Fund, which, as you can guess, is the vehicle for Guinness to give money away. And we've seen a change in tone over the last few years where people have found that less acceptable. So they used to run like a music event as part of their CSR. They used to do a lot in the community, but more and more people are resisting it because they're seeing it as alcohol advertising. So, I mean, are people getting, smarter, or a bit more critical in terms of how companies are manipulating us and using their dollars like that?
Oh, I think so. And I think social media has played a massive part in that.
Yeah.
You just can't hide anymore. In terms of, what you're trying to do. I mean, stuff goes viral so fast. So,
Mm,
especially for instance, if that organization was giving away, to the example I used before, to a homeless shelter that's got an addictions program,
hmm
it becomes like, it's a cat and mouse game. So I think people are becoming way more savvy. I think donors in the last 10 years have become way more savvy, and rightly so. The media has criticized charities that have, not follow through on their commitments, and they've got, crazy overhead and that kind of thing.
hmm
They've nailed them, which, the accountability piece is huge for me. So I don't
hmm
mind that.
hmm
But I think in some ways we all got swallowed up in that to a certain degree. And there's a bit of cynicism.
mm,
But you have, so when it comes, so just a layer on top of that, when you've got someone sponsoring something or, doing something, and there's kind of this underlining, meaning or, trying to affect their bottom line, essentially,
yeah.
people are more aware of it for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I would be very cynical about companies, as I think we've talked about in the past, that
Mhm.
if a company is giving away money, they don't do it out of the goodness of their own heart. They don't
Mhm.
have a heart.
Mhm.
And so we really need to ask questions about why companies are sponsoring these things, what their motives are. And a weird reality with our world is that the companies who have money to give away, they're usually, there's usually something a little unethical in the way they're running to the point. If you see very fair companies, very ethical companies, they don't have the kind of profits that these
Mhm.
other companies have.
Mhm.
So it's a strange
Yeah.
balancing act for
Yeah,
everyone, isn't
no,
it?
for sure. And I find sponsorship has changed, especially in the last 5 years.
Yeah,
I find it's just changed a lot
yeah,
in what we saw before. But yeah, I mean, I think the cannabis piece for sure is going to be a game changer and a bit of a disruptor in the sector, especially
hmm
in countries where it's legal. And I'm anxious to see what that corporate responsibility piece is going to be for them.
yeah,
And I've reached out to a few and had conversations with a number, just wanting to make sure that they understand the not-for-profit side of it as well, and trying to make really good matches. I love
yeah.
matching really great people. So matching companies that are doing things for the right reasons, and
hmm
matching them up. And you've got to keep in mind there are, a number of 20, 30, 40, 50-year olds that have gone from maybe making 100 grand to this year they made $5 million.
Yeah,
So there's personal philanthropic uh, uh, initiatives there as well,
yeah. And these are good people who are
for
suddenly
sure.
cash heavy, who want to do positive things,
Yeah,
and we can tap into that hopefully.
yeah, for sure.
Another interesting one that's come up, and I think we talked about this, or I was telling you about it briefly, was about this organization, Atlantic Philanthropies,
Mhm.
who very big in Ireland, very big in America. Essentially came off the back of this guy called Chuck Feeney, who's a bit of a
Mhm.
hero in Ireland, and he's given away billions of dollars from his company and from his personal wealth. And I don't really know many nonprofits in Ireland that haven't benefited from him. But it's interesting because he's a hero. He's been given like an honorary degree from I think every university in Ireland. He's seen as like this thing we should aspire to. But he made his money from cigarettes and alcohol,
Mhm.
essentially, from duty
Mhm.
free, and
Mhm.
from maybe questionable tax practices. I have to be
Mhm.
careful there. But you just have to look at where his organization is registered. It's Bermuda or somewhere like that, one of these
Mhm.
islands.
Mhm.
But that's quite interesting because it's that one step removed
Right.
where, you know, all these charities who would not accept from a tobacco or alcohol company are
Right.
happy to accept from a foundation,
Mhm.
and they're not really questioning where that money's come from. Have you seen anything like that brewing around cannabis?
No, not yet, but we're early days. We only
hmm
became legal October 17th.
Of course, yeah, of course. So you're only in
Yeah.
the first few months.
Yeah.
I mean, is that an ethical way to approach this? Is to have that extra step in the middle?
I don't know. I would rather just people just be really transparent about it.
Yeah.
And then, you decide you're going to be friends or you decide you're not going to be. There's lots of different charities. So I think, if you don't find one that you like, then you just haven't looked hard enough. There's lots that are doing great work.
Yeah.
And somebody will accept it. It has to be a good match, though, for both.
Yeah, everyone needs to be happy with it, or it's going to end in tears.
For sure.
That's
for
cool.
sure. Tears. We don't want tears.
We don't want tears. That's not except happy tears or joyful tears.
For sure.
In general, like what's the vibe over there? Is it like the majority of people majority of nonprofits would not take it, or majority of your clients would? What are you feeling?
A lot are saying they would, but once again, their mandates, are okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
The children's ones that I work with are not going to accept it. Obviously, the ones that are dealing with drug addiction are not going to take it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's varying. A lot of the hospitals are looking into it.
That's a tough one, isn't it? When that kind of is both sides of it.
I've helped write a couple of policies for hospitals.
Okay.
One being a research branch of a hospital. So they're willing to accept it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I really am watching it closely because this time next year, I sort of want to, come out and do a follow-up and see how far we've come in a year.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to watching it from the outside and seeing what happens and what people's opinions are, because I feel like still people are digesting it.
And for sure.
Yeah, and it's going to bring out some strong opinions.
And the retail stores here haven't opened yet. I think that's going to be another piece.
Yeah.
So it's going to be going on for a long time.
That's funny. Yeah, going in to buy your marijuana. Would you like to add $1 onto this to help people with diabetes? And
yeah,
it's hard to even imagine. It's like I feel like we're coming into this new age that we just haven't experienced before. Even in when alcohol and tobacco came in, there wasn't this kind of nonprofit sector. So it's really
absolutely. So you'd never in a million years think that this was going to be something.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting to hear your thoughts on it. So you help people write their policies, and so people can get in touch with you if they
for sure
need help with this kind of minefield.
For sure, they can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on Twitter. I'm everywhere.
You're everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere.
And hopefully coming to a venue near them soon to speak on all sorts of things. Do you speak about this? Do you go in and do sessions about this?
Yeah.
That'd be good to see.
Last May, I did an express session on it, and it was very popular. And I've been asked to speak other places about it as well. So.
Well, it's an eye-catching session title, isn't it?
For sure.
Yeah. And we had one at the Dublin fundraising conference, which was about psychedelic drugs. Come to think of it, it was nothing to do with fundraising, but they just like to put on these wildcard sessions. And there was a guy who does all kind of like magic mushrooms, peyote, everything, and films himself. And then he designs virtual reality games. And this was a fundraising conference, summer school, which you must come and visit.
I can't wait to go to that. I'm determined.
Yeah.
After seeing all the different amazing people that you and I both know attend, I'm like, I need to be there someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, what I'm going to do in the podcast description is I'll put a link to your Pot or No Pot article.
Great.
And all your social media and everything. And I would encourage anyone to follow you and reach out to you, because you're doing some really interesting stuff and always seem to be a step ahead of most of us.
Well, I am very grateful for you, and you know that you've helped me a lot, and I'm really appreciate it, and I'm happy to be part of this today.
Cool. Well, we'll get you back on maybe in a year's time when you sit down and review it, and let's see what if Canada has exploded yet, or if it's just doing fine.
Let's do it.
All right. Okay, Sam. Listen, thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you again.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Simon Scriver's Amazingly Ultimate Fundraising Superstar podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to changefundraising.com to learn more or get in touch with Simon.